Hello. So we're going to be making some paper roses today. I'm Felicity Jennings from Felicity Crafts, and we're going to be making these paper roses, which are really beautiful, and all we need is one sheet of A4 paper to make that. You can make it from any kind of paper which will fold. So not really thick craft paper, but thinner craft paper. Wrapping paper is good, normal A4 printer paper is good, any of those kinds of things. So we're going to learn to make the rose on its own, like this. So this is what it's going to look like. But if you want to, you can always stick it onto something else. So this is a whole bunch of them in different sorts of paper, and these ones are on craft wire, so they're in there. We've got some ones that look kind of a bit more naturalistic by doing them in red, but then I also went crazy and did it with some music paper there, so a bit less naturalistic, obviously. Another really good use for these roses is wrapping paper. So we don't want to be using wrapping paper that's got glitter on and things like that, all bad for the environment. But we can use this brown paper, no sellotape at all, because we're going to use a reusable ribbon that you can take off again. And then we can stick our rose on to make it look special. You can give it a kind of vintage vibe by using a piece of lace as well here. So we've got a piece of lace going through, and we've got a slightly different coloured rose on there. So there are lots of uses for our roses. You can stick them onto cards, you can stick them onto wrapping paper like that, make a bunch, anything like that. And all we're going to need to do this today is a piece of paper, some scissors, a ruler, and a glue stick. The optional things that you can have to help you would be a little cocktail stick or a kebab stick. Kebab sticks are all over the place at the moment in the supermarkets, really cheap and really good for crafting. So you can have one of those. And if you want to stick it onto a stick or get things a bit more secure, you can use a glue gun, but you don't have to use a glue gun. That's only an optional extra. Otherwise, we can just use ordinary glue stick. So the optional extra would be to add and put it onto something like that. Of course, these would be fantastic for weddings as well. If you were going to make these, you could make a bunch of them. You could make them for table decorations as well. Loads and loads of good things. So if you get your piece of A4 paper, what you need to do is measure 10 centimetres. Now, strangely enough, A4 paper is 21 centimetres wide. So you're going to need to measure across 10 centimetres and then across 10 centimetres again. And how I always do it is make a mark at the top of the paper and the bottom of the paper, and then draw your line so that you've got two there. And we're not going to need this centimetre down the side here at all. So that's going to be excess, but you want them to be the same. So just make sure you've measured 10 centimetres across there and 10 centimetres across there. Then we're going to come down this line and measure 10 centimetres again. So I'm just going to do that with you live while we're here. Now I'm using a biro just so that you can see it, but you'd be much better off doing this with a pencil. So just making, you don't want to have giant marks. I'm just putting the giant marks on here so that you can see it. That's absolutely the only reason. So I'm just going to show you that what I've done there is measure down 10 centimetres, 10 centimetres here and here and here. And then I'm just going to draw a line across. And the measuring is purely so we can make sure we've got exactly 10 centimetres across there. Now we need 3 squares for this. Now the other thing you can do is draw around a coaster, because coasters are 10 centimetres usually. You actually can adapt this for any size that you want. As long as you have 3 squares, that's all that's going to matter. So I've just drawn across there now, and what I've got is that, like that. So I'm going to have 3 10 centimetre squares. Now you can get 4, because these ones are not exactly 10 centimetres at the bottom, even though they look like it. But it's not a bad idea to have an extra one to practice, just in case we make a mistake. But if we're using A4 paper, we're just going to end up with 3 10 centimetre squares. Now I've already done that earlier, so I've got them. These are a slightly pale pink colour just because it's a little easier for you to see. So we've got those, but you don't have to do 10 centimetres. You can, if you want, do anything you like. So just get something square to draw around and do whatever. As long as all three are the same size, it doesn't matter. I often use these pieces of card that you get on the back of packets of paper. You can get those little cheap packets of paper all over, and the back of them often has a piece of card like this, where you're doing this. Now, one of these is 10 centimetres and one is 13 centimetres, and I keep them for drawing around purposes. But if you're using A4, you do that. Now, if you're buying craft paper, it often already comes in a square, and just use the one that you've got. You don't need to change it to 10 centimetres if you don't want to. Okay, so when we've got our three squares, if you're crafting along with me right at the moment, if you've got your squares like that, you need to just have them in front of you, and then we're going to do some folding. Okay, so the first fold that we're going to do is a really standard origami fold. So we're going to hold it together and we're going to fold across like that. So I'll just hold that there for a second so that you can see that that's where we're going. And we're going to do this with all three of our squares. So we're going to do that. Now I keep holding mine and picking it up so that you can see what I'm doing, but keep yours on the surface if you want to. You don't need to do that. So that's our first fold. And we're going to do that with all three of our squares. All the secrets to all kinds of paper crafting is to make a good fold when you get there. So fold along like that. Fold along like that. That's really good. And then do the same with the others. So pick up the same one. We're going to put the corner to the corner. Lovely. And then we're going to fold it. Okay. Now I just said the secret to all origami and paper crafts, but I'm just going to tell you that this isn't origami while we're doing it. The reason this isn't origami is because we're using glue. Traditional origami only uses a square, which we are doing today with starting with a square, but then everything is folded within that square. It doesn't use scissors and it doesn't use glue, but we are going to use scissors and we're going to use glue. So that's what makes it paper folding rather than origami. But the techniques are often the same in the fact that you need to really pull your fingers along. Once you've committed to making a fold, then make that fold good. Okay, so really pull it across like that. Put it down on your surface, give it a good squash. That will definitely make it better. That's actually more important than making it exactly perfect along these edges. Sometimes people worry about making that exactly perfect all the way along the edges like that. But you don't need to worry about that. It's better to make a really good. We're going to be using our scissors, you see, today, not like that. So it doesn't really matter. So now we've got three triangles. Triangles have got a pointy top and a flat bottom. And I want you to have all of them with the pointy bit facing upwards. Okay, so that was our first fold. Fold number one was to go like that. So fold number two is going to be with the flat edge of your triangle at the bottom and the pointy edge of your triangle pointing up towards your nose. We're going to fold it in half like that. Okay, so that's fold number two. We're going to fold like that, and we're going to do that with all of them. So just make sure you're holding it the right way up, and then we're going to move that side over to that side, folding along that middle bit. So you can put it down like that and make it there. Now each time you fold it, the piece of paper is getting thicker and thicker as you're doing that. So the whole thing about making good folds is really important, especially getting right into the pointy bit in the middle, because that's where the sort of hardest bit of folding is going to be when you're doing it like that. So then we've got another triangle, okay? And then we're going to do the same thing with all three of them. And if you did have that spare fourth one, if for some reason you went wrong, you could always make that fourth one. We're going to do a little bit of cutting in a little while with our scissors. And if you've got that fourth one, if you make a mistake on the cutting, then you know you've always got a spare one in there in between. Okay, so this corner is going to go to this corner. making a really good fold. So that was fold number 2. So just in case you're behind with the cutting, I'm just going to show you that was fold number 1. We went like that. We then turned it around so that we had the flat edge along the bottom and the pointed bit at the top, and then we folded it again like that. Now we're going to do the same thing in the fact that we're going to orient it so that the flat edge is along the bottom and the pointed edge is at the top, and then we're going to fold again. At this point you will notice that you've got an open edge and a folded edge, so we're going to make the folded edge turn towards the open edge. So that's fold number 3. So each one is triangles. You're going from a big triangle to a medium triangle to a small triangle. Okay, so we've got a triangle like this. Again, we're changing that side to that side and making a good fold, and you'll notice that it's getting thicker each time. If you are using some craft paper is vastly different. You can have very, very foldy paper, you can have thick paper. It's absolutely fine to use thick paper, you'll just have a more robust rose when you're going in there like that. So I'm changing this side to this side, and that's fine. You're just going to have to put a bit of effort into the folding now to make sure you've got some good folds as it's going around. Sometimes in origami people use a ruler to pull across like that and make it harder fold. It's not necessary if you're using just A4 paper, printer paper, ordinary stuff like that. It isn't necessary, but you can if you're using some thicker paper. Okay, so now we've got this like this, and we're going to change that one as well, folding across that middle one. So now we've got 3 little triangles. So we had a square, we folded it one way, we folded it the other way, and then we folded it the other way. So we've got still a triangle, and we've got 3 of them. Now we're going to do some cutting now. So we're going to get up our scissors. So this is the bit where obviously if we go wrong, we're going to be stuck. So when you've got this triangle now, you've got we've got an edge here which is open, and we've got an edge here which is folded. And we're going to make that shape across the middle there. We're going to go across the top like that. So this is my folded edge. Sorry, this is my folded edge here. I'm going to start on the folded edge and draw a line across. Don't do it with a big felt tip pen like I've just done it. You're much better off with a pencil. Okay, so I've done it with a felt tip pen just so that you can see, but on the one I'm actually making with you now, I'm just going to do it with a pencil. So we've got our open end and we've got our folded end here. I'm going to start at the folded end and I'm going to move across like that, like an ice cream cone when it's going across. And this is going to form the edge of your petal. And when you've done that, you're going to cut it. Be brave, it doesn't really matter. You can make a mistake here and go back over it. You're looking to have a shape that looks like that when we've finished. Okay, so I'm just going to hold this one up again so that you can see. What you want is a nice curvy bit because you're creating the edge of the petal by doing this. So don't be frightened to go really curvy with this, like a bump, like that. You can always snip over it afterwards. So you're looking for your little ice creamy shape, like that. And then we're going to do that with all 3 of them. Okay, I'm just going to check your chat in case there's anybody trying to say anything. No, there isn't. Excellent. So hopefully everybody's following brilliantly. So what we're going to do, if you're feeling confident, you absolutely don't need to do that drawing bit first. Okay, you don't need to do that if you don't want to. You can just cut it straight off like that. Okay, so if you want to do that, you can. You don't have to draw it. You can just confidently do it. We're trying to make all of them more or less the same. but they don't have to be exactly. Don't worry about accuracy. I'm not a fantastically accurate crafter, actually. I think it's more important to have a go. And of course, all these things are supposed to be looking as if they're homemade. We don't want it to look like it was made in a factory, because that's not the point of it. So now we've got ourselves 3 little shapes that look like this. And just before we're going to unfold them, we're going to do one more cut. And the one more cut is going to be across the bottom. So I'm just holding that up so you can see, and we're going to snip off that, because in a minute when we open it up, we want a hole in the middle. So we're creating this little hole in the middle here, and we're going to do that by just snipping the bottom. So you see where I am there? I'm going to snip off that bottom bit. Okay, so it's probably about 1/2 centimetre, if that, when I'm cutting it like that. If you want to go a little bit smaller first and then open it up and go a little bit bigger, you can do that if you want to. Okay, because you can open and then fold it back up again if you want. So when we've done that and we've cut off the bottom like that, so we've got a little flat edge, we're then going to open it up. And when you open it up now, you're going to have a flower shape. But it doesn't look like a rose. It doesn't look like a rose at this stage. What it looks like at this stage is a daisy. I can put my finger in there in between. So if it's super tiny, you might want to make sure you can put your finger. I'm going to point out I have quite small fingers, so don't feel like you have to have a gigantic space in there. That will do like that. Now just make sure that you're happy with your folds here, because these are creating the petals. The most important thing about roses is those beautiful petals all folding together. So we need to make sure we've got a nice valley in between. If you're not happy with that, you might need to just give it another little cut, fold back up again and cut. But otherwise, you need to open all of them and make sure you're happy with the hole in the middle and that we've got enough of a valley in between there. It doesn't have to be exactly the same all the way around. It can just be nicely open like that. Okay. So we're now going to do our next bit of cutting, and this is where we could go wrong with that, because you'll notice now that you've got lots and lots of sections. I'm going to just draw on my sections so that you can see where they are. Don't draw on yours. You absolutely do not need to know to do this at all. You don't want that. So you've got all these folded lines here going all the way around, and you can see those as folds. What you need to do is identify one petal, because we're going to cut one of them out. So what we're going to do is get this here like this now, and we're going to cut this one. So where my big purple lines are, we're going to cut. Okay, so we're going to go in here and we're going to cut. Don't lose this one. Don't throw it away. We want the whole thing. So we've now got a big one and we've got one out. That's just going to sit there. Then you're going to pick up your next one. And this time we're going to cut 2 petals. Now just hold on before you cut, because we want those 2 petals to stay the same. So there are 2 in there. And what I want to do is cut them together. So I've now got that shape and that shape. So the first one, I cut 1 petal out, and the second one, I've cut 2 petals out. Anybody guess what we're going to do next? Yes, that's right. We're going to put 3 out, and that will be my last one. All 3 together, not 3 individual ones. We're going to cut 3. So we've now got this together. Okay. Now you can rearrange them on your table so that you've got the biggest one, and then the next biggest one, and then the next biggest one, and then your 3er, your 2er, and your 1er all together. So I know you can't see them on my table here, but you lay them out whichever way you want to do. Okay, and then pick up your glue stick, because we're really on the way now. Okay, little bit of glue out and pick up the big one first of all. Okay, we're going to pick up the big one and we're going to put a little bit of glue along here. Again, I'm using my big felt tip pen, but you don't need to. This is where we're putting the glue. We're going to put the glue and then we're going to fold it over itself like that. You're going to be able to see some felt tip pens on my one, but don't worry, felt tip pen marks. So I've put a little bit of glue where that is, and I'm now going to fold that together and just hold it with my hand. So now we've got a petal that's sitting there like that. Put that down because it'll need to dry just a little bit, and pick up your next one and do the same thing. So we're going to pick up our rose, put a little bit of glue along it and pull it together. Each one will be getting a little bit more bowly than it was before. So we started flat, we had a little bit, a lot. So that's there like that. We've now got our next one and we're going to do exactly the same thing. Folding that around like that, so that we folded it together, and this one's quite upwards now. When we get to our threer, we're still going to do the same thing. Pulling that around like that. Same with the two. When we get to the one, some people report when I'm live crafting this that the one is getting really awkward. Can you see what I'm doing with my fingers to hold it there? I'm just sticking my finger inside to hold it. When you get to this one, it's exactly the same thing. We're folding it round on itself, but it's not the end of the world if you're finding this one too awkward just to miss it out. Okay, you can curl this around and make it into the tiniest little cone like that when we're doing that. But if it's really awkward, also don't worry about squashing it a little bit when you do that. So I'm going to squash that together to stick it. And then I'm going to just stick my pencil in to fluff it back out again. And you can stick a pencil inside, but it can be a little bit awkward, that middle one. Now we're going to curl the edges of our petals, because what we want is to make this look really rosy, is to curl that around like that. And there are a couple of ways for us to do that. The first way we can do it is using a cocktail stick. If you've got a cocktail stick, you just need to roll that around the edge of it and just pull it over a little bit like that. Pull it out and it'll curl it around like that. And a cocktail stick works really, really well for doing that sort of thing. Just pulling it around. If you don't have a cocktail stick, you could use the kebab stick that also is going to make the stand of the rose later on, the stem of the rose if you want to, and do the same thing. It's a little bit bigger and longer to move around. And you're just going to curl that around like that on each one going around. And just curling them down as far as you can go. If you don't have any of those implements, you can basically try and find anything you want, like a paintbrush or a pencil or anything, or just use your fingers. So the other thing to do is just curl over with your fingers like that. Okay, so we're just going to keep curling around with our fingers when we're doing it. Now in a moment we're going to assemble our rose and put it together. So remember, if you're just making a rose on its own like this and you're sticking it to something, the glue gun is going to be the thing that you're going to use to stick it onto something, but you're still going to be using this kind of glue when you're putting it together. So you can do it that way. If you're going to be using some of the craft wire, you can bend that through, assemble the whole thing, and then put it together afterwards. You know, so you can stick the wire up afterwards as you're going along. If you're going to be sticking it onto a card or even onto a brooch or anything like that, you're going to be putting that stem in after as we go along. And if your glue gun might help you to do that when you're going. But I don't like to use any fancy equipment, and not everybody has glue guns, so that you can do this any way that you want. So all the way through, I'm just going along and I've curled all of them So you can see how that's looking when it's curled like that. Okay, same thing here with our little ones all the way, and then we're going to do it right. Even the wanna can be curled just a little bit at the top. When we assemble it, we're going to assemble it from the biggest one outwards. So this is the biggest one that I've got, and I'm going to put a load of glue right in the middle. So again, I'm just going to show you with a felt tip pen mark where the glue is going to go. So you can see there, the felt tip pen mark, which you don't need to make, is where the glue is going. So I'm getting my glue and I'm just putting it in. I always say this when we're doing paper crafts. At this point, you need to just be careful. We don't want to look like we've sat on this rose. So we're going to get the next size up and we're just going to put it inside and stick it together. You can decide whether you want your petals all to be together or whether you want them to be slightly askew from each other. And then we're going to carry on doing that. Stick your glue inside like that. Get your next size one, stick it in, put your fingers inside like that to help it stick together. People often ask me whether children can do these crafts. Yes, children and adults can do exactly the same crafts when you're doing this. And because this is from a piece of A4 paper, you can even draw on it beforehand and get a pattern and things like that. If you're using a glue gun, you do have to be careful because they can be hot. I managed to burn my finger on one yesterday when you're doing when you're not being careful. But there's no reason why they couldn't. It's fiddly, but children sometimes have good fine motor skills as well. So here I am assembling the whole thing, putting it in like that. If that middle one is a little bit tricky to get in, you could always miss that one out. And there is your beautiful rose. Now, when you're doing this, when you pick it up now, it might fall apart, and that's because it needs to dry. So give it a little bit of time to dry when it's doing that. So just don't worry about it for a minute. It will need just a little bit of time to dry out when you're there. You could use double-sided tape or PVA glue as well to stick that together. You just need to dry in between each one for PVA. With the rose like this, if you now want to stick some wire or a stick inside there, you might want to get a rose that looks like this so that you could carry it around or put it in a vase or on a table decoration. You need to get your kebab stick, and you should still have a hole at the back there that you can stick it up. If you can't fit it exactly, give a little snip and then stick the kebab stick up inside. If it's falling down like that one just did like that, what you need to do is then get your glue gun and put a little spot of glue on the back of that glue gun there, which will just stop it from falling down. So I'm just putting some glue, splodging it there, and that just creates a little, that needs to dry just for a second before I turn it over. So I'll swap onto here's one I made earlier. So when you do that, if you've got a little bit of glue on the bottom bit, it stops it from falling back down again. If you're doing it, there we are. So that one's like that. If you're doing it with craft wire, and you can push your craft wire up from inside when you're doing it like that, if you make a little curl on the end here, as you put it through, that curl can hook itself inside the rose and stop it from falling down. And the wire is just a little bit more flexible. So if you want to be putting it into a vase or something and you want it to bend over like that, that will help when you're doing it like that. But that is a beautiful rose that you have just made, ready out of a range of colours, ready to stick onto your wrapping paper with a lovely bit of lace, or ready to sit on your table. A rose that will last forever. If you want to find me, I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Felicity Crafts, and I hope you enjoyed that session, and I will see you soon. Bye.